Hello everyone. So far we have learned how to find the trigonometric ratios of all the spatial angles. We have also learned about the inverse trig functions. We learned that inverse trigs undo the trigonometrics. So in this tutorial, I would like to let you know about two things, very important. Number one, I would like to use sine ratio as reference. All other ratios remain the same. So for example, if you have sine of sine inverse, because they undo each other, right? Of x, for instance, this is always equal to x, always. But sine inverse of sine of maybe an angle theta is not always equal to theta. So let me write it here. Not always. Not always, because sometimes it can be equal to theta, but not always. It depends on the position of the theta. Remember that sine inverse has a restriction for its output. The angle must be from negative 90 to positive 90. That is in the first quadrant and fourth quadrant. But for the first one, theta here can be any angle, right? It can be, for instance, 120 degrees. But sine inverse will never return 120 degrees because 120 is in the second quadrant. And sine inverse returns angle in either quadrant number 4 or quadrant number 1. So let me use 120, or let me use 60 degrees as reference. Let's assume we have y-axis, we have x-axis. This is a unit cycle, but I just don't want to draw the cycle. 60 degrees is situated here, right? Let's assume that this is 60 degrees. 60 degrees. What is the coordinate? The y value at that point, or let me start with x value, would be 1 divided by 2, right? But the y value is root 3 divided by 2. Its reflection here in the second quadrant will be 120 degrees. So let us do that. This is the reflection, 120 degrees. The coordinate at that point, for x, it will be negative 1 divided by 2, because you can see x-axis here is negative, but y-axis remain positive, and they are on the same point with 60, so it will be root 3 divided by 2. In the third quadrant, it will be 240, right? Because it will be 60 more than 180, situated somewhere here. This is 240 degrees. The coordinate will be negative, negative, because this is negative axis, this is also negative axis. So it will be negative 1 over 2, comma, negative root 3 divided by 2. This is the coordinate in the third quadrant. Then here, it will be 300 degrees. The coordinate will be, for x, it will be positive, but for y, it will be negative, because y here is negative, but x is positive here. How do I find all these angles? I started with this one. I know that in the second quadrant, it will be 60 less than 180. 180 minus 60 will give us 120. In the third quadrant, this is 180 degrees, right? We are adding 60 extra to get to 240. And once you are here, you know this is 360 degrees. This is 60 less than 360, so it will be 300 degrees. So let's start with the first one. You know, this is going to be an output for the sine. So if you are here, we're going to use this root 3 divided by 2. So let's see whether it is true. Sine of sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2 is equal to what? You know, you have to start with the bracket first. So we have to evaluate this before this. So this one, sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2. The question is sine of which angle is root 3 divided by 2? We have infinitely many of them, right? Because sine of 60 degrees is root 3 divided by 2. Sine of 120 degrees is root 3 divided by 2. They are coterminal angles. If you go counterclockwise, you come back here, you have additional of 360 degrees, which is going to give us 420, right? 400 sine of 420 will also be equal to what do we call it, root 2 divided by 2. So we have infinitely many of these, but because we have this situation, therefore we have to restrict it, and I have shown you how to restrict the domain for the sine function in order to get it inverse. So you have to take angles from negative 90, this is negative 90, but if you go around like this, it will be 270. This is 90 degrees. It means from origin here, if this is 0, if you come back here, negative, counting angles clockwise will make them negative, but counterclockwise will make them positive. So this is negative 90, this is positive 90. The reason why we use negative 90 instead of 270 degrees, we need the smallest angle within these two quadrants. For instance, this is 300 degrees. If you count it clockwise, it will be negative 60. And negative 60 and 300 degrees have the same ratios. You should know that. All right. Therefore, sine inverse of root 30 divided by 2, since we have infinitely many of them, but the smallest angle will be 60 degrees. So this will be equal to sine of 60 degrees. And sine of 60 degrees is root 3 divided by 2. So this is root 3 divided by 2. So you can see that this and this are exactly the same. We have no problem with that. So therefore, sine of sine inverse of anything will give you that anything. Sine of sine inverse of x will forever be equal to x. But let's come back to this one. Let's start with something very simple, because this is why I say not always. Sometimes it can be equal to. So let's use an angle 60 degrees here. So we have sine inverse of sine of 60 degrees. What is sine of 60 degrees? It is root 3 divided by 2. So this is equal to sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2. So what is sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2? We have said it is equal to 60 degrees. So this is equal to 60 degrees. So you can see that in this situation, this and this are exactly the same, which means that sine inverse of sine theta is theta. But let me show you a situation where it will not be equal to the theta. Once you pick an angle anywhere other than here, it will be different. For example, let me take this and this as reference. Sine inverse of sine of 120 degrees. What is sine of 120 degrees? It's root 3 divided by 2. You can see that here. So this will be sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2. But what is sine inverse of root 3 divided by 2? You can see it is 60 degrees, because it will return values within this range. So it will be 60 degrees instead of 120 degrees. We started with 120, we end up with 60 degrees. This is why I said not always. Sometimes it can give you something different. Likewise, if we use 300 degrees, sine of 300 degrees is equal to negative root 3 divided by 2. Sine inverse of sine of 300 degrees. This is equal to sine inverse of sine of 300 degrees is negative root 3 divided by 2. But what is sine inverse of negative root 3 divided by 2? Though it will return values here, so it will be this one, 300. But we are not going to use 300 because 300 is too big. Instead, you have to count it clockwise, which is going to give us negative 60 degrees. So this is equal to negative 60 degrees, which is not the same thing as 300. Though they have the same ratios, but sine inverse of negative root 3 divided by 2 will give you negative 60 degrees, not 300 degrees. You should know that. This is very important. This is the same thing for cosine and tangent. Thank you for watching. Do share to your learning colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more exciting videos. Bye bye.